She took her only son to her sister's wedding, only to see her billionaire CEO ex, the son's father, marrying the same friend. Her fingers trembled as she entered her contact information into a device that probably cost more than her car. When their hands brushed during the exchange, electricity shot up her arm. Nicholas felt it too. She could tell by the way his eyes darkened, how his fingers lingered against hers longer than necessary. Have you ever walked into a room where you felt like you didn't belong? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The ballroom doors opened to reveal the groom, and Vanessa's world collapsed in real time. Her 10-year-old son squeezed her hand and whispered words that stopped her heart. Mom, why does the groom look exactly like me? Standing at the altar in a designer tuxedo was Nicholas Carter, billionaire CEO, her sister's fiancé, and the father who abandoned them both. What would you do if your worst nightmare walked down the aisle at your sister's wedding? Have you ever kept a secret so devastating it could destroy your family? Have you ever faced the person who broke your heart at the worst possible moment? Vanessa had built a new life from the ashes of betrayal, but some ghosts refused to stay buried. Stay with me as we witness what happens when past and present collide in the most explosive way possible. Hit that like button if you've ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and telling the truth that could destroy them. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to where it all began, 10 years ago in Birmingham, Alabama. She was the first in her family to walk onto a college campus, carrying dreams bigger than her scholarships and a heart ready to believe in fairy tales. The lecture hall stretched before her like a cathedral of opportunity, mahogany panels gleaming under academic lighting while students in designer clothes occupied seats like thrones. Vanessa clutched her secondhand textbook, feeling both invisible and exposed. Economics 101 was supposed to be her gateway to financial freedom, not a daily reminder of how different she was from everyone else. She arrived 30 minutes early every day, claiming the same back row seat where she could observe without judgment. Her notebook was filled with perfect notes because she couldn't afford to miss anything. While other students scrolled through phones or whispered about weekend plans, Vanessa mentally calculated how many restaurant shifts she'd need to cover next month's textbooks. That Tuesday morning changed everything. The professor droned on about market economics when movement caught her eye. A guy in the third row turned around, scanning the classroom until his gaze locked onto hers. Green eyes, sharp jawline, the kind of confidence that came from never wondering if you belonged. Nicholas Carter. She'd heard whispers about him. Son of some New York business empire, the guy who showed up to class in clothes that cost more than her monthly budget. He should have been everything she avoided. Instead, his stare made her skin warm in ways that had nothing to do with the classroom's broken heating system. When Professor Williams announced group projects, fate stepped in with cruel precision. Carter in Washington echoed through the hall. Nicholas turned toward her with a smile that promised everything she'd never dare to want, and everything that would eventually destroy her. After class, he approached her desk while other students rushed toward the exit. Vanessa, right? His voice carried the kind of smooth confidence she'd only heard in movies. Want to grab coffee and figure out this project? She almost said no. Almost protected herself from whatever this was before it started. But something in his expression stopped her. Genuine interest, not pity. Like he actually wanted to work with her, not because she was assigned, but because she mattered. I work until 9 at Romano's restaurant, she heard herself saying. We could meet after. Perfect. I'll pick you up. No, the word came out sharper than intended. I'll meet you somewhere. Where do you usually study? There's this coffee shop near campus. Quiet, good for concentration. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number. Her fingers trembled as she entered her contact information into a device that probably cost more than her car. When her hands brushed during the exchange, electricity shot up her arm. Nicholas felt it too. She could tell by the way his eyes darkened, how his fingers lingered against hers longer than necessary. See you tonight, Vanessa Washington. The way he said her name made it sound like poetry instead of just another student ID number. Have you ever walked into a room where you felt like you didn't belong? where every glance reminded you that you were different? Tell me about that moment in the comments. As she watched him leave, designer jacket slung over his shoulder like armor, one thought echoed in her mind. This was either going to be the best mistake of her life, or the one that broke her completely. The coffee shop near campus became their neutral territory, where a billionaire son learned what it meant to work for survival instead of sport. Steam rose from their coffee cups like incense while rain painted the windows, creating a cocoon where Birmingham waitressing stories mixed with Manhattan penthouse memories. Two worlds learning each other's language. Vanessa had chosen the corner table deliberately, back to the wall, eyes on all exits. Old habits from a neighborhood where trust was earned, not given. Nicholas arrived exactly on time. Laptop bag slung over his shoulder, hair slightly damp from the October drizzle. He moved through the coffee shop like he owned it, but when he sat across from her, something shifted. The polished confidence cracked just enough to reveal curiosity underneath. "So," he said, opening their economics textbook, Supply and Demand. "Should be straightforward." Nothing's straightforward when you're living it instead of studying it. Vanessa pulled out her notebook, pages crammed with color-coded notes and highlighted sections. "You want to understand economics? Try choosing between textbooks and groceries." His pen stopped moving across the page. "What do you mean?" I work 30 hours a week at Romano's because my scholarship covers tuition, not living. My mom sends $20 when she can, but she's got 2 other kids and diabetes medication that costs more than our rent." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Your family probably spends more on dinner than I make in a week." Instead of the pity she expected, Nicholas leaned forward. "Tell me what that's like." "Really?" For the next hour, she found herself describing a world he'd never seen. Double shifts that left her feet bleeding in cheap shoes. Studying by candlelight when the electricity got cut off. The pride of earning every dollar and the exhaustion that came with it. "You've never had to choose between textbooks and groceries," she said softly. "No," he admitted, voice quiet. "But I've never met anyone who made me want to understand what that choice feels like." When he reached for their shared notes, his fingers brushed her knuckles. The touch lingered, warm and deliberate. Vanessa looked up to find him watching her with an intensity that made studying impossible. "You know what's crazy?" Nicholas said, thumb tracing along her knuckles while she forgot how to breathe. "I've been in school with people who have everything, but none of them have what you have." "Yeah? What's that?" "Fire. Purpose. You're not here because Daddy wrote a check. You're here because you fought for it." The way he looked at her, like she was remarkable instead of struggling, made her chest tighten with something dangerous. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of trust she couldn't afford to give. "When did you first realize that love doesn't see bank accounts or zip codes? Have you ever fallen for someone from a completely different world? Share your story." As they packed up their books, his fingers brushed her cheek. "I know we're different," he whispered, "but what if different is exactly what we both need?" Before she could answer, his phone buzzed, his father's name flashing like a warning she couldn't yet understand. The interruption felt like cold water, reminding her that some distances couldn't be bridged with good intentions and shared coffee. The night she led him into her tiny dorm room, she wasn't just opening a door, she was opening a heart that had learned to guard itself from disappointment. Her dorm room glowed amber from the single lamp. Textbooks scattered across her narrow bed like promises of a future she was building brick by brick. When Nicholas looked around, she saw him seeing her. Not her limitations, but her determination. The carefully organized space spoke of someone who made every inch count, every dollar stretch. "This is home," she said, suddenly self-conscious about the second-hand furniture and patched walls. "It's perfect," he replied, and the way he said it made her believe him. "It feels real. My place is just expensive emptiness." They've been meeting at the coffee shop for 3 weeks, project completed, but excuses to see each other multiplying. Tonight, when rain started pounding against the library windows, she'd heard herself inviting him over before fear could stop her. Nicholas moved through her small space with surprising comfort, fingers trailing along the spines of used books she'd bought with Tip's money. He paused at her dresser, studying a photo of her family. Mom, little brother, sister Maya, all crowded together on their front porch. Love making up for what money couldn't provide. They look happy, he said. We are. Poor doesn't mean miserable, you know. I'm learning that. He turned from the photo, stepping closer. You're teaching me a lot of things I never knew I needed to learn. The space between them disappeared like morning mist. When he reached for her hands, his thumbs traced the calluses from her restaurant job like they were precious scars instead of marks of hardship. These hands, he whispered against her skin, they're building something beautiful. When he kissed her, slow and deliberate, she felt wealthy for the first time in her life. Not because of what he had, but because of how he made her feel. Valuable, cherished, seen. His lips moved against hers with reverence that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with genuine desire. Are you sure? He asked, forehead pressed against hers, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. I'm sure. And she was. Not because she was caught up in the moment, but because for once someone wanted her exactly as she was. Struggling student, working-class girl, dreamer with empty pockets and a full heart. They moved together slowly, carefully, like people who understood that some moments change everything. He undressed her like she was made of something precious, each touch asking permission, each kiss a question she answered with sighs that came from somewhere deeper than desire. You're incredible, he breathed against her neck, and she believed him because his actions matched his words. What's more intimate? Someone seeing your struggles or someone honoring them? When has someone made you feel valuable exactly as you are? Drop a heart if you felt that rare recognition. Afterward, wrapped in his arms on her narrow mattress, she felt like she could conquer the world. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility she'd never dared to imagine. My family's going to love you, she whispered against his chest, already planning introductions, already seeing him at Sunday dinners, already building dreams she didn't know were built on sand. His silence lasted just long enough to plant the first seed of doubt she refused to acknowledge. She thought meeting his family would be like every other challenge she'd conquered through preparation and determination, until she realized some battles can't be won with good intentions. The Carter penthouse dining room gleamed with crystal and inherited wealth, every surface reflecting a legacy Vanessa could never inherit. The chandelier above cast shadows that seemed to shift and judge with each cutting comment wrapped in polite conversation. Nicholas had prepared her for formal, but nothing could have prepared her for hostile. So, Vanessa, Mrs. Carter said, wine glass poised like a weapon. Nicholas tells us you're on scholarship. How? Enterprising of you. The word enterprising dripped with condescension that made Vanessa's spine straighten. She'd worn her best dress, the one she'd saved 3 months to buy, but under Mrs. Carter's appraising stare, it felt like costume jewelry at a diamond convention. Yes, ma'am. Academic and need-based. I'm grateful for the opportunity to earn my education. Mr. Carter leaned back in his chair, studying her like a business proposal he was about to reject. And what are your plans after graduation? I imagine someone with your background has practical concerns about employment. Translation, you're here for money, and we know it. I plan to work in economic development, helping communities like mine access resources and opportunities. Vanessa kept her voice steady despite the fire building in her chest. Education should lift people up, not just the people who can already afford it. How idealistic. Mrs. Carter's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Nicholas has always been drawn to unique experiences. I'm sure this phase will pass like all the others. Under the table, Nicholas's hand found hers, fingers intertwining in what should have been support but felt more like apology. Why wasn't he defending her? Why was he letting his parents talk about her like she was temporary entertainment? I'm not a phase, Mrs. Carter. Vanessa's voice carried the strength of every woman in her family who'd ever stood up to people who tried to make them feel small. I'm the woman your son chooses to love. The silence that followed could have shattered the crystal. Mr. Carter set down his fork with deliberate precision. Young lady, I think you misunderstand Nicholas's situation. He has obligations, expectations, a future that's been carefully planned. Whatever this is, it's not sustainable. Dad, Nicholas started, but his father's raised hand silenced him like a trained dog. We've built an empire, Miss Washington. That empire requires strategic marriages, social connections, partnerships that benefit everyone involved. Surely you understand that emotions are lovely, but they don't build legacies. Have you ever been made to feel like you weren't good enough for someone you loved? How did you handle people who tried to diminish your worth? Tell me how you found your voice in those moments. The rest of dinner passed in Arctic politeness, every course served with a side of subtle insults and cold dismissal. When they finally escaped to the elevator, Nicholas pulled her close. They'll come around, he promised, but his voice carried doubt she pretended not to hear. What she didn't know was that his father had already made a decision that would change everything, and Nicholas was too much a coward to fight it. The countdown to heartbreak had already begun. Love felt invincible until the morning she noticed him checking his phone with the guilt of a man keeping secrets. Their coffee shop meetings felt different now. Conversations interrupted by buzzing phones and glances at his watch. Even their corner table by the rain-streaked window couldn't protect them from whatever was pulling him away. The easy laughter they'd shared was being replaced by forced smiles and careful words. You seem distracted, Vanessa said, watching him scroll through messages for the third time in 10 minutes. Everything okay? Fine. Just family business stuff. Nicholas slipped his phone into his jacket pocket, but his fingers kept reaching for it like a nervous habit. Where were we? We were talking about Thanksgiving break. You said you wanted me to meet your extended family. She searched his face for the enthusiasm that used to light up when they made plans. Instead, she found hesitation. Right, about that. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was struggling with something. Maybe we should wait. The holidays are crazy for my family. Business obligations, you know. She knew. She knew that 3 weeks ago, he'd been excited about introducing her to his cousins. She knew that last week, he'd started taking calls outside instead of in front of her. She knew that the man who used to text her good morning every day now sometimes went hours without responding. Nicholas. She reached across the table, covering his restless fingers with her steady ones. What aren't you telling me? His green eyes met hers for a split second before darting away. You're imagining things. I love you. But love wasn't the question anymore. The question was whether love was enough when everything else was falling apart. That evening, she found the business card that fell from his jacket while he was in the bathroom. Carter Industries, merger consultation. The date was circled in red, exactly 2 weeks after his father's dinner ultimatum. Suddenly, his recent distance made terrifying sense. When he returned, she was holding the card. Want to explain this? His face went pale. Vanessa, it's complicated. Complicated how? Either you're planning some business deal that affects us, or you're not. Either you're being honest with me, or you're not. Her voice stayed calm, but inside, everything was cracking. Which is it? My father. He's been pushing this merger for months. It would secure our family's position, but it requires... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. It requires what, Nicholas? A strategic marriage. Someone from the right family, the right background. Someone who can help close the deal. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in around her like a trap. And I'm not the right background. It's not about you. It's about business, politics, things that are bigger than both of us. When you feel someone pulling away but they won't admit it, do you push for truth or protect yourself with denial? What would you do if love felt conditional on circumstances you couldn't control? She stood up slowly, gathering her books with mechanical precision. When you decide what's more important, your family's business or what we have, let me know. The door chimes jingled as she left him sitting there, business card on the table between them, like evidence of a betrayal she'd finally admitted was happening. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, and for 60 seconds, she believed in miracles, until reality crashed down with the weight of perfect timing for imperfect circumstances. The bathroom fluorescent light flickered above her as she stared at the test, pink lines bold as promises. In that moment, her tiny dorm room expanded to hold dreams of cribs and lullabies, of Nicholas teaching their child to walk, of love made manifest in tiny fingers and beating hearts. She pressed her hand against her still flat stomach, wonder flooding through her like warm honey. A baby, their baby. The physical proof that what they shared was real, permanent, unbreakable. All the doubts from the past few weeks melted away because this changed everything. Nicholas might be struggling with family pressure, but he wouldn't abandon his own child. "We're going to be okay, little one," she whispered to her reflection. "Your daddy loves me, and he's going to love you even more." The next few days passed in a haze of secret joy. She caught herself smiling during economics lectures, imagining Nicholas's face when she told him. She started looking at baby clothes in store windows, calculating due dates, planning their future as a family of 3. She practiced the words in her mirror every morning. "Nicholas, I have something wonderful to tell you. We're going to have a baby. You're going to be a father." Each version sounded more perfect than the last. Their regular coffee shop became sacred ground where she would change their lives forever. She arrived early, choosing their usual corner table, ordering his favorite drink along with her decaf, the first of many small changes she was ready to embrace. But when Nicholas walked in, something was wrong. His shoulders carried tension she'd never seen before, his usual confident stride replaced by the careful movements of a man walking toward his own execution. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from her without his usual kiss hello. "We need to talk." The words every woman fears. She pushed the coffee toward him, smile bright with nervous energy. "Actually, I have something to tell you first. Something amazing. Vanessa, please, let me go first." His voice carried a weight that made her stomach clench. "My father called this morning." Before she could respond, the coffee shop door opened again. Mr. Carter himself strode in, expensive suit and cold eyes, scanning the room until he found their table. He moved toward them with the predatory grace of a shark who'd caught the scent of blood. "Miss Washington." He didn't ask permission before pulling out the third chair, settling into it like he owned the entire establishment. "How convenient that you're both here." Nicholas went pale. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Cleaning up a mess before it becomes a disaster." Mr. Carter's eyes never left Vanessa's face. "Son, you've had your fun, but it's time to face reality. The Henderson merger is happening whether you like it or not. Sarah Henderson is expecting a proposal by Christmas, and this little distraction needs to end." Vanessa felt like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. "What Henderson merger?" "The business arrangement that will save our company and secure Nicholas's future." Mr. Carter spoke to her like she was a child who needed simple concepts explained. "He's marrying Sarah Henderson. Their fathers have been planning this union for months." "That's not," Nicholas started. "It is exactly what's happening." His father's voice cut through any protest. "Unless you'd prefer to see Carter Industries bankrupted and your inheritance disappear. Unless you want to explain to your mother why we lost everything, because you couldn't think past your college infatuation." The coffee shop suddenly felt airless. Other customers continued their conversations, unaware that her world was ending between the morning rush and lunch crowd. The pregnancy test in her purse felt like it was burning through the fabric. "Nicholas." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Tell him this isn't true. Tell him about us." The pause that followed lasted forever and no time at all. Nicholas looked between his father and her, conflict written across every feature she'd learned to love. When he finally spoke, each word landed like a physical blow. "The timing is impossible, Vanessa. You have to understand. Have you ever held news that you knew would change everything? That moment when you're bursting with joy but scared of how the world will react? Share what that felt like." "I understand perfectly." She stood up slowly, dignity wrapped around her like armor. "I understand that your child is inconvenient." The silence that followed her words was deafening. She walked into that restaurant carrying his child and their future. She walked out carrying only the pieces of her shattered heart. The fancy restaurant his father had chosen felt like a courtroom where she was both defendant and evidence. Crystal glasses caught the light like tears she refused to shed. White tablecloth stretched between them like a battlefield where love went to die. "You're pregnant." Nicholas said it like an accusation instead of a miracle. His face had gone through shock, denial, and landed somewhere between panic and disgust. Yes. She kept her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. I was going to tell you at the coffee shop, but your father had other plans. Mister. Carter leaned back in his chair, studying her with the cold calculation of a man who solved problems by eliminating them. How much? Excuse me. How much money will it take to make this situation disappear? I'm prepared to be generous, considering the circumstances. The words hit her like ice water. She looked at Nicholas, waiting for him to defend her, defend their child, defend what they'd built together. Instead, he sat frozen, staring at his untouched wine like it held answers he couldn't find in her eyes. I don't want your money. Each word came out sharp and clear. I want the father of my baby to act like a man instead of a scared little boy. Miss Washington, Mr. Carter continued as if she hadn't spoken, let's be practical. You're a college student with no resources. Nicholas has obligations that extend far beyond personal desires. This arrangement benefits no one. This arrangement? Her voice rose despite her efforts to stay composed. You mean my pregnancy? My baby? Your grandchild? I mean an unfortunate complication that threatens to destroy everything my family has built. His tone stayed conversational, like they were discussing weather instead of her future. Nicholas will provide financial support, of course. Quietly, discreetly. But this fantasy of playing house needs to end. She turned to Nicholas, searching his face for any sign of the man who'd held her in his arms just days ago, who'd whispered promises about their future, who'd looked at her like she was his whole world. Say something. The plea came out broken. Anything. Nicholas finally raised his eyes to meet hers, and what she saw there destroyed the last of her hope. Not love, not regret. Fear. Pure, selfish fear of disappointing Daddy and losing his comfortable life. The merger is worth hundreds of millions, he said quietly. It will employ thousands of people. Sarah's a good person who understands what this marriage means for both our families. What about what this baby means? She pressed her hand against her stomach, protecting the life growing there from the poison filling the air around their table. What about what I mean? You mean everything to me. The words came out hollow, rehearsed. But I have responsibilities bigger than what I want. Responsibilities. She repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what you call abandoning your child? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'll make sure you're taken care of, that the baby has everything it needs. But I can't. You can't what? Love us. Choose us. Fight for us. She stood up, legs shaking but voice getting stronger. You want to know what's impossible, Nicholas? Impossible is loving someone who sees your pregnancy as a problem to solve instead of a miracle to celebrate. Impossible is realizing the man you trusted with your body doesn't trust you with his future. Other diners had started to notice the tension at their table, whispered conversations and sideways glances adding audience to her humiliation. She didn't care anymore. Let them watch. Let them see what happened when rich boys played with poor girls' hearts. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Mr. Carter said, pulling out a checkbook. Name your price and let's end this cleanly. She looked at the checkbook, then at Nicholas's pale face, then at the future she'd imagined crumbling like sand castles at high tide. You want to end this cleanly? She grabbed her purse, pregnancy test still hidden inside like evidence of a crime. Fine, consider it ended. But let me be clear about something. This baby will know they were wanted, loved, and fought for by one parent. They'll also know exactly which parent threw them away for money. When someone shows you who they really are under pressure, do you believe them? Have you ever had to choose between fighting for love or protecting your dignity? What did you choose? As she walked toward the restaurant exit, Nicholas called her name once, just once. She didn't turn back. 10 years later, she would wish she had, because the words he never got to say might have changed everything. But some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but sometimes it takes losing everything to find your village. Her childhood bedroom felt smaller with her belly growing larger. Hand-me-down maternity clothes hanging in a closet that once held from dresses and college dreams. But in the kitchen, her mother's hands kneading bread filled the house with warmth that no penthouse could match. "You sure about this, baby girl?" Her mother asked the same question every morning, but not out of doubt, out of love that wanted to carry whatever burden Vanessa couldn't handle alone. "I'm sure, Mama." Vanessa rubbed her 6-month belly, feeling the baby's strong kicks against her palm. "This little one is going to change the world. I can feel it." The pregnancy had been harder than she'd expected. Morning sickness lasted all day for months. Her scholarship required maintaining grades while her body demanded rest she couldn't afford. But every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every flutter of movement reminded her why she was fighting. Her little sister Maya burst through the kitchen door, arms full of grocery bags and excitement. "NASA, I got the crib bedding on clearance. Yellow and green, perfect for a little mystery baby." Maya had thrown herself into aunt duties with the enthusiasm she brought to everything else. "You didn't have to do that." Vanessa's eyes filled with the tears that came too easily these days. "You should be saving for college. Family first. Always." Maya kissed her forehead, then spoke directly to the baby. "Your mama's got a whole army ready to love you, little one. You're already so wanted." The truth was simpler and more complicated than that. Vanessa had built a wall around her heart where Nicholas used to live, but the space wasn't empty. It was filled with fierce protective love for their child. She'd stopped crying about his abandonment and started planning for their future instead. She'd transferred to the local community college to save money, moved back home to save rent, picked up online tutoring jobs that she could do around doctor appointments. Every decision was calculated around one priority: giving this baby the best life possible. "Any word from the father?" Her mother asked carefully, like she did once a week. "No, and I don't want any." Vanessa's voice carried conviction that had grown stronger with each month of silence. "This baby doesn't need someone who didn't want them. We're enough. We're going to be more than enough." Late at night, when the baby's movements kept her awake, she would whisper stories about the future she was creating. College funds started with babysitting money. Dreams that might be delayed, but wouldn't be denied. A child who would grow up knowing their worth had nothing to do with their father's bank account. She'd chosen names carefully, writing them in a notebook beside ultrasound photos. For a girl, Grace, because that's what carried them through each day. For a boy, Ethan, meaning strong, enduring, firm. Either way, this baby would know they were chosen, celebrated, wanted desperately by the parent who mattered. The day Ethan was born, he opened his eyes and looked exactly like his father. The same green eyes that once promised forever. But instead of pain, Vanessa felt overwhelming gratitude. Nicholas had given her the most precious gift possible, even if he'd been too much of a coward to stay and appreciate it. "Hello, beautiful boy," she whispered, holding her son for the first time. "You're going to have such an amazing life. Your daddy missed the greatest gift he could ever receive, but that's his loss. You're never going to feel that absence because you're going to be so loved. How do you rebuild when someone you trusted breaks your foundation? What strength did you discover in yourself when you had no choice but to be strong? Share your story of starting over." As she held Ethan, skin to skin, heart to heart, Vanessa made a vow that would carry them through the next 10 years. Nicholas Carter had missed the greatest gift of his life, but she would make sure their son never felt that absence. She built a beautiful life in the space where his love used to be, until the day her sister called with news that would shatter her carefully constructed peace. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Ethan practiced piano, his small fingers finding melodies that somehow always sounded melancholy. Sunlight streamed through their modest living room as Maya's excited voice delivered news that would eclipse every careful boundary Vanessa had built. "Nessa, I'm engaged." Maya's voice bubbled with joy that made Vanessa smile, despite her exhaustion for pulling a double shift at the hospital where she now worked as a billing coordinator. "I can't wait for you to meet him." "That's wonderful, honey. Tell me everything." Vanessa set down her coffee, giving Maya her complete attention the way she always did when family needed her. "His name is Nicholas Carter, and he's perfect. He's this successful businessman from New York, but he's so down to earth. We met at a conference in Atlanta, and I know this sounds crazy, but I think I knew on our first date that he was the one. The coffee mug slipped from Vanessa's fingers, crashing against the hardwood floor in a splash of brown liquid and white ceramic. Ethan looked up from his piano, concerned green eyes, so much like his father's that strangers sometimes asked if he was adopted because he looked nothing like her. "Mom, you okay?" Ethan abandoned his music to help clean up the mess, his 10-year-old hands careful around the broken pieces. "I'm fine, baby. Just clumsy." She forced her voice to stay steady while her world tilted off its axis. "Maya, did you say Nicholas Carter?" "Yes. Do you know that name? He's from some big family business, but he never talks about it much. Says he prefers to focus on the present instead of the past." Maya's laugh carried pure happiness. "He's taking me to meet his family next month. I'm so nervous." Vanessa stared at Ethan, who was carefully picking up ceramic shards, completely unaware that his father, the man who'd abandoned them both, was about to marry his aunt. The irony was so cruel, it almost felt like a cosmic joke. "Tell me more about him," Vanessa managed, throat tight with panic she couldn't let Maya hear. "He's kind, really kind. And he listens when I talk, you know? Like really listens. He's been through some difficult things, I think. There's sadness in his eyes sometimes that he tries to hide. But he's worked hard to become a better person." Maya sighed contentedly. "I love him, Nessa. I really, truly love him." The words hit like physical blows. Maya loved him. Maya, who'd spent 10 years watching Vanessa struggle as a single mother, who'd helped raise Ethan, who'd never known why Vanessa sometimes got that faraway look when people asked about Ethan's father. "Has he ever been married? Any kids?" The questions came out carefully casual. "No kids. He says he's always focused on work, never found the right person to build a family with. But he's amazing with children. You should see him with the kids at my school. He'd make such a good father someday." The room started spinning. Nicholas, who'd abandoned his own son, was playing family man with her sister. Nicholas, who'd chosen money over love, was promising Maya the future he denied them. "You're going to be my maid of honor, right?" Maya's voice brought her back to the present catastrophe. "I can't wait for you and Ethan to meet him. He's going to love you both so much." What would you do if your past collided with your present through someone you love? When the secret you've protected suddenly threatens to hurt innocent people, how do you choose between truth and peace? "Of course I'll be your maid of honor," Vanessa heard herself saying while her mind raced through impossible scenarios. "When's the wedding?" "6 months from now." "I know it's fast, but when you know, right?" As Maya continued planning their dream wedding, Vanessa stared at Ethan, who looked more like Nicholas every day, and realized their decade of peace was over. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper with gold embossing, formal and beautiful. Except the groom's name made her hands shake and her son ask questions she'd never learned how to answer. The invitation lay on their kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene, elegant script announcing a union that would shatter secrets. Ethan traced the gold lettering with his finger, reading aloud with the careful pronunciation his teachers praised. "Maya Washington and Nicholas Carter request the honor of your presence." He looked up at her with curious green eyes. "Mom, why do you look so upset? Isn't this good news?" Vanessa stared at the formal announcement, remembering another invitation she'd never received, to the wedding that was supposed to save his family's business 10 years ago. Apparently, that merger had fallen through, leaving Nicholas free to find love with someone else. Someone who happened to be her sister. "It's wonderful news, baby." Aunt Maya is very happy. She managed to keep her voice steady while her mind raced through every possible scenario, each one ending in disaster. "Will I get to meet him before the wedding? I've never had an uncle before." Ethan's excitement was pure and innocent, completely unaware that he was talking about the father who'd chosen money over him. "Maybe. We'll see." The non-answer felt like another lie added to 10 years of careful omissions. That evening, after Ethan went to bed, Vanessa sat staring at the invitation until the words blurred together. She could picture Nicholas now, probably more handsome at 32 than he'd been at 22, probably more successful, definitely more charming if he'd won Maya's heart this completely. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Can't sleep. Too excited. Have I mentioned how perfect he is?" You're going to love him, Nessa. He reminds me of you sometimes. He's got this strength, like he's been through difficult things but came out better. The message made her stomach turn. Maya was describing the man who'd walked away from his pregnant girlfriend without a backward glance, who'd chosen his father's approval over his child's existence, who'd somehow convinced himself he was a good person despite abandoning his family. Another text followed. He's been asking about my family. Says he can't wait to meet the sister who raised me and her amazing son. I told him all about how you had Ethan young and built this beautiful life for both of you. He said you sound incredibly strong. Vanessa stared at those words until they stopped making sense. Nicholas was curious about her, about their son. The son he'd rejected before birth was now being described as amazing by the woman he planned to marry. The next morning brought more challenges. Ethan bounded into the kitchen with his usual energy, chattering about his upcoming science project while she made breakfast and tried to plan for a future that suddenly felt impossible to navigate. Mom, can I ask you something? He settled into his chair with the serious expression he wore when approaching topics that mattered to him. Always. Why don't I have a dad like my friends do? The question she'd been dreading for years finally arrived on an ordinary Wednesday morning over scrambled eggs and orange juice. Sometimes adults make choices that seem right at the time, but hurt people later. Your father made a choice before you were born. The answer felt insufficient, like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. What kind of choice? He chose his family's expectations over building a family with us. Truth, but not the whole truth. Never the whole truth, because 10-year-olds shouldn't have to carry the weight of adult betrayals. Will I ever meet him? Ethan's voice carried hope that broke her heart. The silence that followed contained 10 years of pain, protection, and impossible decisions. How could she explain that he was about to meet his father at his aunt's wedding? How could she watch Nicholas play loving stepfather to Maya while denying his own son? When keeping a secret starts hurting innocent people, when does protection become selfishness? If you were in Vanessa's position, would you tell the truth or keep the peace? What matters more, protecting your child or protecting your family? I don't know, baby. Sometimes life surprises us. She kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of childhood innocence that wouldn't survive what was coming. The RSVP deadline approached like a countdown to disaster, each day bringing them closer to a reckoning that would change for lives forever. She had 2 weeks to prepare for a war she never wanted to fight, armed with nothing but 10 years of silence and a son who deserved better than half-truths. The dress shop mirrors reflected a woman she barely recognized, poised, elegant, carrying herself like armor was built into her bones. The navy blue dress cost more than she usually spent on clothes in 6 months, but this wasn't about money anymore. This was about walking into that ballroom with her head high and her dignity intact. You look beautiful, Mom. Ethan sat in the corner chair, swinging his legs while she turned in front of the three-way mirror. Is this for Aunt Maya's wedding? Yes, baby. We want to look our best for her special day. The truth felt like ash in her mouth. Special day. More like the day her carefully constructed world would collapse in real time. The saleswoman adjusted the dress's neckline, chattering about the elegant fabric and perfect fit. What she didn't know was that Vanessa was choosing armor for a battle she'd been avoiding for 10 years. Every stitch, every seam was selected for maximum impact when she walked into that ballroom, carrying the secret that would destroy everyone's happiness. Back home, she helped Ethan try on his little black suit. He looked impossibly grown up, his green eyes serious as he adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. Those eyes that mirrored his father's so perfectly that strangers often asked questions she'd learned to deflect with practiced ease. Do I look handsome, Mom? He spun around, jacket flying out like a cape. The words caught in her throat because he looked exactly like Nicholas had in college photos she'd seen online during weak moments over the years. You look perfect, baby. Just perfect. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Vanessa sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and pen, trying to plan for every possible scenario. What would she say when Nicholas saw them? How would she explain to Maya who he really was? How could she protect Ethan from the confusion and pain that was coming? She'd rehearsed different versions of the truth in her bathroom mirror until her reflection looked tired of hearing them. Maya, I need to tell you something about Nicholas. Nicholas, I'd like you to meet your son. Ethan, that man is your father, but it's complicated. None of the words felt right because there was no right way to detonate a bomb in the middle of someone's wedding. Her phone buzzed with another excited text from Maya. 3 more weeks. I can't wait for you to meet him. He keeps asking about my family, especially about you and Ethan. I think he's nervous about making a good impression. The message made her stomach turn. Nicholas was nervous about impressing her. The woman whose heart he'd shattered, whose child he'd abandoned, whose life he'd destroyed with his cowardice was someone he wanted to charm at his wedding to her sister. 2 days before the wedding, Maya called in tears. I'm so scared, Nessa. What if his family doesn't like me? What if I'm not good enough for his world? The questions were like echoes from 10 years ago when Vanessa had asked the same things about the same man. The difference was that Maya didn't know the answer yet, that Nicholas's world would chew her up and spit her out the moment she became inconvenient. Maya, listen to me. Vanessa chose her words carefully. You're enough exactly as you are. If his family can't see that, the problem is with them, not you. And if Nicholas truly loves you, he'll fight for you no matter what anyone else thinks. The silence on the other end told her Maya heard the weight behind those words, even if she didn't understand their source. You sound like you're speaking from experience, Maya said quietly. I am. The truth, finally, even if Maya couldn't see its full shape yet. Just remember that you deserve someone who chooses you every single day, no matter what challenges come up. How do you prepare for a confrontation that could change everything? When you know pain is coming, but you have to walk toward it anyway. Share how you found courage when you felt afraid. The morning of the wedding, Vanessa looked at herself in the bathroom mirror one last time. The woman staring back was stronger than the girl who'd been broken 10 years ago. She'd survived his abandonment, raised their son alone, built a life worth defending. Whatever happened today, she would not let Nicholas hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt her. The ballroom doors opened like the gates of destiny, and for one heartbeat, Vanessa believed she could walk through this unscathed, until her son's whisper shattered that illusion forever. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across silk and satin, while string quartet music floated through air thick with expensive perfume and buried secrets. The ballroom was a fairy tale, setting for a nightmare about to unfold. Every elegant detail, sharp and bright, like the edges of broken glass. Vanessa held Ethan's hand as they moved through the crowd of wedding guests, her navy dress flowing behind her like liquid courage. She'd chosen a seat in the back, close to the exit, thinking she could observe without being noticed. Control the situation. Minimize damage. She was wrong about everything. The ceremony began with traditional music that made her chest tight with memories of dreams she'd once carried. Maya looked radiant in white silk and vintage lace, walking down the aisle toward a future that was built on lies everyone was about to discover. Then the officiant asked the groom to take his place at the altar. Nicholas emerged from the side door, and 10 years collapsed into nothing. He was more handsome now, success and maturity adding depth to features that had already been perfect. His tuxedo was tailored to perfection, his hair slightly longer than she remembered, his presence commanding the attention of every person in the room, including hers. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and time stopped. Nicholas's confident smile faltered, his face going pale as recognition hit him like a physical blow. His hand reached out instinctively, gripping the altar rail for support while his mouth opened in silent shock. The wedding coordinator whispered something urgent in his ear, probably reminding him to breathe, to stand up straight, to remember he was getting married in front of 200 guests. But his eyes stayed locked on Vanessa's face like she was a ghost he'd never expected to see again. Maya, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding, beamed at her groom from beneath her veil, completely unaware that her perfect day was about to become everyone's worst nightmare. Mom. Ethan tugged at her hand, his voice carrying the confusion of a child sensing adult tension he couldn't understand. Why does everyone look upset? She followed his gaze, and realized other guests had noticed the strange energy crackling between the back of the ballroom and the altar. Whispers started spreading through the crowd like ripples in disturbed water, heads turning to see what had captured the groom's attention so completely. That's when Ethan said the words that would haunt everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. "Mom, why does the groom look exactly like me?" The question wasn't whispered. In the acoustics of the ballroom, during a pause between musical phrases, his innocent observation carried clearly through the space. Heads whipped around to stare at them, then back at Nicholas, then back at Ethan. The resemblance was impossible to miss once you were looking for it. Same green eyes, same strong jawline, same way of tilting his head when confused. 10 years of careful secrets unraveled in a 10-year-old's honest question. Nicholas gripped the altar rail harder, his knuckles white against the dark wood. Maya followed everyone's stare, her smile fading as she took in the scene. Her sister standing in the back of the ballroom with a child who looked like a miniature version of her groom. "Nicholas?" Maya's voice carried across the sudden silence, wedding dress rustling as she turned fully to face him. "What's happening?" The officiant cleared his throat, trying to regain control of a ceremony that was spiraling into chaos. "Perhaps we should." "No." Vanessa's voice cut through the attempted diplomacy, clear and strong. She stood up slowly, still holding Ethan's hand, still meeting Nicholas's stare with the courage she'd found in 10 years of survival. "I think everyone deserves to know the truth." The ballroom held its collective breath. 200 people watching a family drama unfold in real time. Elegant wedding becoming Greek tragedy with crystal and silk as backdrop. Nicholas finally found his voice, though it came out rough and broken. "Vanessa, I didn't know you would be here. I'm Maya's sister." Each word carried the weight of decade-old pain and fresh betrayal. "The sister she told you about. The one who raised her son alone after his father abandoned them both." Understanding dawned on Maya's face like sunrise, beautiful and terrible. Her bouquet trembled in her hands as she looked between her groom and her sister, between the man she loved and the nephew who shared his face. "This is your son," she said. Not a question, but a statement heavy with implications that would destroy everyone's happiness. Have you ever had a moment when your past and present collided in the worst possible way? When you realized there was no going back to the way things were? Tell me how you survived that moment. Nicholas pushed through the crowd of confused guests, his face desperate as he approached them. But before he could reach their row, Maya's voice rang out across the ballroom, carrying pain that made everyone wince. "How long have you known they would be here?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke, poisoning everything it touched. What happened next would change for lives forever. The truth came out not in whispers or careful conversations, but in an explosion of accusations, tears, and revelations that left no heart unbroken. The fairy tale wedding transformed into a battlefield. Elegant decorations now witnessed to betrayal and heartbreak. Champagne glasses sat abandoned on tables as voices rose and tears fell. Love letters scattered across marble floors like evidence of crimes against the heart. Nicholas reached their row just as Maya lifted her wedding dress and marched down the aisle toward them, her face a mixture of fury and devastation. The string quartet stopped playing, unsure whether to continue providing soundtrack to a disaster. "Is this true?" Maya's voice shook with barely contained emotion as she confronted her sister and her groom in front of everyone they'd ever cared about. "Is Ethan his son?" Vanessa looked down at her boy, who was pressing closer to her side as adult chaos swirled around him. This wasn't how she'd wanted him to learn the truth. Not like this, not with strangers watching, not with his aunt's heart breaking in real time. "Yes," she said simply, because lies had caused enough damage already. "Ethan is Nicholas's son." The ballroom erupted. Gasps from wedding guests, angry voices from both families, the sound of Maya's bouquet hitting the floor as her hands flew to cover her mouth in shock. "You were pregnant with his child, and you never told me." Maya's anguish cut through every other noise, raw and bleeding. 10 years, Nessa. 10 years, I watched you struggle as a single mother, and you never said a word about who his father was. I was protecting you from the kind of man who abandons his family for money." Vanessa's voice carried the strength of every sleepless night, every missed meal, every moment she'd chosen their son's well-being over her own comfort. Nicholas stepped between them, hands raised like he could somehow control the disaster he'd created. "It wasn't that simple. You don't understand the situation I was in." "Then explain it." Maya spun on him, wedding dress twirling like a white tornado. "Explain how you had a child with my sister and then proposed to me without mentioning it. I didn't know you were related when we met." His voice was desperate, grasping for any foothold in the avalanche of consequences. "By the time I realized who you were, I was already in love with you. I thought I could make things right." The ballroom fell silent except for Ethan's quiet sobs against Vanessa's side. Everyone was staring at them like they were actors in a play nobody wanted to watch but couldn't look away from. "Make things right." Vanessa's laugh held no humor, only the bitter wisdom of a woman who'd learned that some people never change. "By lying to my sister? By playing house with her while ignoring your actual son?" "I tried to find you," Nicholas said, and for the first time, his voice cracked with something that might have been genuine regret. "After my father died 2 years ago, I tried to find you both. I wanted to make amends, to be part of Ethan's life. But you disappeared." "I didn't disappear. I built a life where my son wouldn't have to wonder why his father didn't want him." She pulled Ethan closer, her protective instincts in overdrive. "We were fine without you. We are fine without you." Maya wiped tears from her cheeks, mascara streaking like black rain. "I can't believe this. I can't believe either of you." She looked between her sister and her fiancé, two people she loved who had built their relationships with her on fundamental lies. "Maya, please." Nicholas reached for her, but she stepped back like his touch would burn her. "Don't." Her voice was quiet now, more dangerous than shouting. "Just don't. I need to think. I need to understand how the two people I trusted most in the world could do this to me." Mr. Carter, who'd been watching from the front row, finally stood up. "This circus needs to end. Nicholas, you're making a fool of yourself and embarrassing both families." "Dad's dead," Nicholas said without looking at his father-in-law-to-be. "I don't have to choose his approval over my son anymore." The words hung in the air like a confession 10 years too late. When everyone you love is hurting because of choices you made to protect them, how do you move forward? What do you do when good intentions create terrible consequences? Share your thoughts. In the silence that followed, Ethan stepped forward, his small voice cutting through adult drama with the clarity that only children possess. "Are you my daddy?" he asked Nicholas simply. Every person in that ballroom held their breath. Nicholas knelt down to eye level with his son, seeing his own face reflected in miniature for the first time. "Yes," he whispered, voice broken with a decade of regret. "I am." What happened next would determine whether this family could ever heal from the wounds they'd inflicted on each other. Some explosions destroy everything in their path. Others clear the ground for something better to grow. The hotel suite replaced the ballroom as their meeting place. Designer wedding dress exchanged for jeans and tear-streaked faces. Formal place settings abandoned for takeout containers and conversations that should have happened years ago. Maya sat cross-legged on the hotel bed, still wearing her wedding shoes, but everything else changed into comfort clothes that her bridesmaids had rushed to bring her. Her hair was down, veil forgotten somewhere in the chaos of the afternoon that had started as her perfect day and ended as everyone's worst nightmare. "I need to understand," she said, looking between Vanessa and Nicholas like they were puzzle pieces that didn't fit together. "I need to understand how we got here." Nicholas sat in the chair by the window, still in his tuxedo pants but jacket and tie discarded, looking older than his 32 years. "I was 22 and terrified. My father threatened to destroy your family's businesses if I didn't end things with Vanessa. He had the connections to do it, to ruin your mother's restaurant, to get Vanessa's scholarship revoked, to make sure none of you could find work anywhere." Vanessa, curled up on the couch with Ethan sleeping against her shoulder, finally spoke. "You should have trusted me to make that choice with you. I thought I was protecting you. Both of you. His voice carried a decade of regret that couldn't change what had already been broken. I thought walking away would keep you safe. Walking away made everything harder. She stroked Ethan's hair, her voice soft to avoid waking him. I had to drop out of school, move back home, work 3 jobs just to survive. Your protection felt a lot like abandonment. Maya wiped her eyes with tissues that had become her constant companion since the ceremony imploded. Why didn't you tell me, Nessa? When I started dating him, when I fell in love with him, when I said yes to his proposal, why didn't you warn me? Because you were happy. Because I thought maybe he'd change, become the man you deserved. Because I didn't want my past to destroy your future. Vanessa's voice cracked on the last word. I was trying to protect you too. The room fell silent except for the sound of Ethan's steady breathing and the distant noise of city traffic. 3 adults sitting in the wreckage of good intentions and terrible choices, trying to figure out how to move forward without destroying each other completely. I called off the wedding, Maya said finally. Obviously, but I don't know what happens now. I don't know how to love someone who kept something this big for me. And I don't know how to be angry at my sister for doing what she thought was right. Nicholas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like prayer. Maya, what I felt for you is real. But I understand if you can't forgive this. I understand if what we had is over. What we had was built on lies. Her voice was matter of fact, like she was stating weather conditions instead of ending an engagement. Real love requires truth, Nicholas. All of it, even the parts that hurt. Ethan stirred against Vanessa's shoulder, blinking sleepy eyes as he took in the hotel room and the 3 adults who'd been arguing about his existence all day. Are you really my dad? He asked Nicholas again, voice small and uncertain. Nicholas nodded, not trusting his voice to stay steady. Why didn't you want me before? The question came out with the devastating honesty of childhood, cutting straight to the heart of everything that mattered. I was scared and selfish. I thought I wasn't good enough to be your father. I was wrong. Nicholas's voice broke completely. I miss so much. Your first steps, your first words, teaching you to ride a bike. I can't get those years back, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be your dad now. Ethan considered this with the seriousness of someone much older than 10. Will you leave again if things get hard? Never. I promise you, Ethan. I will never leave you again. How do you rebuild trust after betrayal? When someone who hurt you wants a second chance, what does accountability look like? What would you need to see to believe someone had truly changed? The conversation that followed wasn't about forgiveness. That would take time. It was about establishing new rules for a relationship that had to exist whether they liked it or not. They were bound together by blood, by history, by a 10-year-old boy who deserved better from all of them. 10 years of silence had hidden more than just a father's identity. Some secrets, when finally revealed, transformed pain into purpose. The park where they met for Ethan's first father-son outing looked different in morning light. Possibilities stretching across green grass and blue sky. The future no longer overshadowed by the pain of the past. Vanessa sat on a bench watching Nicholas teach their son to throw a baseball, seeing not the man who'd abandoned them, but the father Ethan deserved to have now. 3 months had passed since the wedding that never was. 3 months of awkward conversations, careful boundaries, and the slow work of building trust between people who'd hurt each other in ways that left permanent scars. Maya had moved back to Birmingham, taking a teaching job at Ethan's school where she could be close to family while figuring out her next steps. The engagement ring sat in a jewelry box on her dresser, neither returned nor worn, just waiting for her to decide what forgiveness looked like. She still loves you, Vanessa told Nicholas during one of their weekly co-parenting meetings. But love isn't always enough to fix what's broken. I know. He watched Ethan practice his swing, pride and regret mixing in his expression. I'm not asking her to take me back. I'm just trying to prove that I'm not the same man who walked away from you. And he was different, in ways both small and significant. He showed up when he promised to. He listened when Ethan talked about school, friends, dreams for the future. He asked Vanessa's permission before making plans, respecting the life she'd built and the boundaries she'd established. Most importantly, he'd started therapy to understand the patterns that had led him to choose fear over love, obligation over authenticity, his father's approval over his own family's well-being. "I'm learning that being a good father isn't about being perfect," he told Dr. Martinez during one of their sessions. "It's about showing up, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." The hardest conversation came when Ethan asked why his parents weren't together if they both loved him. Vanessa and Nicholas sat on either side of him at the kitchen table, trying to explain adult failures to a child's logical mind. "Sometimes people hurt each other so badly that they can't be together anymore," Vanessa said gently. "But that doesn't mean we don't both love you completely. Will you ever be friends again?" Ethan looked between them with hope that made both adults' hearts ache. "We're working on it," Nicholas answered honestly. "It takes time to rebuild trust, but we both want to do what's best for you." The breakthrough came unexpectedly during Ethan's school play, where he'd landed the lead role in a production about family traditions. Vanessa and Nicholas sat together in the auditorium, watching their son deliver lines about what makes a family real. Not blood or marriage or living in the same house. 10-year-old Ethan proclaimed from the stage, costume slightly crooked, but voice clear and strong. "Family is people who choose to love you every single day, no matter what." The words hit both parents like lightning, illuminating truths they'd been too hurt to see before. After the play, as they walked to their cars under stars that seemed brighter than usual, Nicholas stopped walking. "I need you to know something," he said, voice careful but determined. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect us to be anything more than Ethan's parents. But I need you to know that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I put you through. What I put our son through." Vanessa looked at him, really looked, and saw not the scared boy who'd chosen safety over love, but a man who'd done the hard work of becoming someone worthy of their child's respect. "I forgive you," she said simply. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was poisoning the life I built for us." Ethan needs parents who could be in the same room without hatred crackling between them. They would never be lovers again. That bridge had burned completely, and some damages couldn't be repaired. But they were finding something more valuable than romance. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and love for the extraordinary child they'd created together. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't getting what you wanted, but getting what you needed instead. When has life surprised you by giving you something better than your original plan? Share your story of unexpected blessings. 6 months later, Maya started dating the music teacher from her school, a kind man who knew her history and loved her anyway. Nicholas sold his New York penthouse and bought a house 3 blocks from Vanessa and Ethan, close enough to be present, but far enough to respect boundaries. The final scene played out at Ethan's 11th birthday party, where 4 adults who'd once been enemies worked together to give one child the celebration he deserved. Maya brought homemade cake. Nicholas organized games in the backyard. Vanessa orchestrated everything with the skill of a woman who'd learned to make miracles happen with limited resources. If this story taught you anything about forgiveness, second chances, or the strength of single mothers, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about real people finding healing in impossible situations. Comment below, what would you have done in Vanessa's situation? And remember, sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one that was broken. Sometimes love gets a second chance to do things right. As the sun set over their backyard celebration, 3 silhouettes stood watching Ethan blow out birthday candles. Not a romantic reunion, but something more valuable. A family learning to love each other in healthy ways, built on truth instead of secrets, on respect instead of possession. Some stories don't end with weddings or perfect reunions. The best ones end with people choosing to show up for each other, day after day, building something real from the pieces of what was broken.